"Get out of my sight, you worthless dog!" the man yelled, his words cutting through the cold night. Max, bruised and broken, ran into the darkness, unsure if he would survive. However, no one could have imagined what this same dog would do. 1 year later, a moment so unbelievable it changed everything. What would you do if you saw this happen? Hit subscribe now and let us know in the comments where you are watching from. It was a chilly November evening in a small, quiet town. In the shadows of a rundown house, a dog sat curled up in the corner of a backyard filled with debris. His fur was matted, his ribs were visible beneath his skin, and his eyes carried a sadness too heavy for words. His name was Max, but he had not heard anyone call him that in months. Max had once been a joyful pup, the kind of dog that would chase after butterflies and wag his tail at the sight of anyone. However, life had taken a cruel turn. His owner, a man named Kevin, had become bitter and neglectful after losing his job. Max became the victim of his anger, receiving harsh words, neglect, and, worse, physical abuse. The once lively dog had learned to hide, to stay out of the way, and to expect nothing from the world. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and Max's spirit grew dimmer. The neighbors occasionally noticed his condition, but no one dared to intervene. Kevin was known to be confrontational, and people preferred to keep their distance. Max became invisible, a forgotten soul in a broken world. One winter night, the unimaginable happened. Kevin, in a drunken rage, lashed out at Max one last time. The terrified dog bolted, squeezing through a gap in the backyard fence and disappearing into the cold, dark streets. The freedom he had longed for had finally come. But at what cost? Max had no idea where to go, and his body was weak from months of neglect. For days, he wandered the streets, scavenging for scraps and hiding from strangers. His trust in humans had been shattered. The once friendly pup now flinched at every sound, every shadow. Yet somewhere deep inside, a spark of hope remained. A faint belief that maybe, just maybe, life could be different. Max's paws were raw from walking endlessly on the cold pavement. His body, weak from hunger, trembled as the winter wind bit. Through his thin, matted fur, he had found a small alley to hide in, curling up beside a dumpster for warmth. The smell of discarded food nearby was tempting, but his body was too tired to move. As the first rays of sunlight peeked over the horizon, Max stirred, his ears twitching at the faint sound of footsteps. He lifted his head weakly, his instincts telling him to run, but he was too exhausted to move. A shadow fell over him, and a soft, gentle voice broke the silence. "Oh my goodness, you poor thing." It was a woman named Clara, a kind-hearted veterinarian who lived a few blocks away. Clara had been out early walking her own dog when she spotted Max curled up in the alley. Her heart sank at the sight of him, skin and bones. His eyes filled with fear and pain. Clara crouched down slowly, careful not to startle him. "It is okay, sweet boy. I am not going to hurt you," she whispered, extending her hand. Max flinched but did not move. For a moment, Clara thought he might bolt. However, then their eyes met. In that fleeting moment, Max seemed to sense something different. This was not like the cold, harsh stares he had grown used to. There was warmth in her gaze, a kindness he had not felt in what seemed like forever. Clara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small piece of jerky. She placed it gently on the ground and stepped back. Max hesitated, his body tense, but the smell of food was too much to resist. He crept forward cautiously, his ribs protruding with each step, and devoured the piece of jerky as if it were the first meal he had eaten in days. "That is it," Clara said softly, her voice steady and reassuring. "I have more, but you have to trust me." Clara knew she could not leave Max in this condition. She slowly removed her scarf and placed it on the ground near him, hoping to provide some warmth. "I will be back for you, okay? Just stay here." Max watched her walk away, his body tense, but he did not run. Something about her presence had stirred a faint memory of trust, a tiny flicker of the dog he used to be. Later that morning, Clara returned with a carrier, some blankets, and a bag of food. To her relief, Max was still there, though his eyes darted nervously as she approached. This time, she brought her own dog, a friendly golden retriever named Daisy, who wagged her tail and approached Max with curiosity. Daisy's gentle demeanor seemed to calm him, and for the first time in months, Max allowed someone to come close. Clara worked patiently, earning his trust bit by bit. She carefully placed the food inside the carrier, and after what felt like an eternity, Max hesitantly stepped inside. Clara secured the door, her heart pounding with relief. "You are safe now," she whispered. "I promise." Back at her clinic, Clara gave Max a thorough examination. The injuries and scars on his body told a heartbreaking story. But what struck her most was the look in his eyes. There was pain, yes, but also a glimmer of resilience. She cleaned his wounds, gave him a warm bath, and wrapped him in soft blankets. For the first time in a long while, Max felt safe. Max's body began to heal under Clara's care. Days turned into weeks, and the physical signs of his past abuse slowly faded. His coat grew shinier, his ribs were no longer visible, and the deep cuts on his paws had healed. However, his spirit was another story. The once playful, trusting dog remained wary, retreating to the corner of the room whenever someone new entered. Clara was patient. She understood that healing Max's heart would take time. Every morning she would sit near him, reading or working on her laptop, letting him know she was there without forcing interaction. Daisy, her golden retriever, became Max's silent companion, lying down near him as if to say, "I am here too." One quiet afternoon, as Clara worked on some paperwork in the corner, she noticed a movement from the corner of her eye. Max had gotten up from his usual spot and was cautiously approaching Daisy. Clara held her breath, watching as Max sniffed Daisy's tail, and then, for the first time, lay down beside her. It was a small step, but for Max, it was monumental. Clara decided it was time to take things further. One morning, she attached a leash to Daisy and gently invited Max to join them on a short walk. At first, Max hesitated, his eyes darting nervously. However, as Daisy wagged her tail and trotted ahead, Max took a tentative step forward, then another. By the time they returned, he was walking beside Clara with a bit more confidence. It was during one of these walks that something extraordinary happened. Clara and the dogs were passing a playground when a little boy, no older than 5, ran up to them. "May I pet your dogs?" he asked, his small hand reaching out before Clara could respond. Max froze. His body stiffened and his ears flattened. Clara gently stepped between Max and the boy, concerned that the sudden movement might frighten him. However, before she could explain, Max did something no one expected. He took a cautious step forward. The boy knelt down, his small hand outstretched, and Max leaned in just enough to sniff it. Clara watched in awe as Max allowed the boy to pet him. The gentle touch of the child seemed to awaken something in Max, a memory of kindness he had almost forgotten. For the first time in a year, his tail gave a slight wag. "That is a good boy," the little boy said with a smile before running back to his parents. Clara knelt down beside Max, tears welling in her eyes. "You are so brave, Max," she whispered. "I knew you had it in you." Max's progress was not just heartwarming, it was remarkable. The dog who once flinched at the slightest movement was now beginning to trust again. Clara could feel his resilience growing with each passing day. He followed her around the clinic, his steps still cautious but steady, and he began to greet Daisy with a wagging tail every morning. It was as if the pieces of his broken spirit were slowly being put back together. Clara decided it was time for the next step. She had recently started working with a local therapy program that paired dogs with children in need of emotional support. She had seen firsthand how animals could bring comfort and healing to those who struggled with trauma, anxiety, and loneliness. But Max, he had endured so much. Could he truly be ready for something like this? Still, Clara could not shake the feeling that Max had something special to offer. She reached out to the program director and explained Max's journey. "He has been through so much, but there is something in him. He has this quiet strength. I believe he could make a difference." The director agreed to a trial session. On a crisp Saturday morning, Clara brought Max to the community center where the therapy program was held. The room was filled with children, each facing challenges of their own. Some had experienced loss. Others struggled with anxiety or disabilities. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, but Max hesitated at the door. Clara knelt beside him. "It is all right, Max. You are safe here," she said softly. Daisy gave him an encouraging nudge, and after a moment, Max took a tentative step forward. As they entered the room, the children's eyes lit up. "Look, it is a dog," one of them exclaimed. Max's ears perked up at the sound, and for a brief moment, Clara saw a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. She introduced him to the group, explaining how Max had once been afraid of humans, but had learned to trust again. The children listened intently, their faces filled with empathy. One boy, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, caught Max's attention. The boy's name was Liam, and Clara later learned that he had stopped speaking after losing his father in a car accident. Liam watched Max with wide eyes, but he did not approach him. Instead, Max approached Liam. The room fell silent as Max, his tail wagging gently, walked over and sat beside the boy. Liam's hand trembled as he reached out to touch Max's fur. For a long moment, the two simply sat there, their connection unspoken but undeniable. Then, in a voice so soft it was almost a whisper, Liam said, "Hello, Max." The room erupted in gasps and tears. It was the first word Liam had spoken in months. Clara could not believe what she was witnessing. Max, the dog who had once been broken and terrified, had become a source of healing for a child who needed it most. Max's bond with Liam marked a turning point, not just for Max, but for everyone who witnessed the moment. It became clear that Max was not merely a survivor. He was a symbol of hope and resilience. Word of Max's journey spread quickly throughout the community. People began to reach out to Clara, wanting to learn more about the dog who had touched so many hearts. Max continued his work in the therapy program, becoming a favorite among the children. With each session, he seemed to instinctively understand who needed him most. He would sit patiently beside a nervous child, rest his head on the lap of someone struggling with sadness, or wag his tail to brighten another's day. His presence brought comfort in ways that words never could. Liam, the boy who had first spoken to Max, became one of his closest companions. With Max by his side, Liam began to open up, little by little. He started talking again, sharing his feelings about his father's death. His mother could not hold back her tears as she thanked Clara. "Max gave my son back to me," she said. "I will never be able to repay you." However, Max's story did not end there. Inspired by his transformation, Clara decided to document his journey. She shared photographs and videos of Max's recovery and his work in the therapy program on social media. The post went viral, touching the hearts of people across the country. Messages poured in from others who had experienced hardship, thanking Clara for sharing Max's story and calling him a beacon of hope. Max's story caught the attention of local news outlets, and soon Clara was invited to share his journey on a popular talk show. Sitting beside Max on national television, she spoke about his resilience, his bravery, and the extraordinary transformation he had undergone. Viewers were moved to tears as they learned how this once abused dog had gone on to change lives. The impact did not stop there. Donations began pouring into the therapy program, allowing it to expand its services and support more children in need. Clara also launched a campaign to raise awareness about animal abuse, encouraging people to report neglect and give rescued animals a second chance. She named the campaign Max's Mission, and it grew into a nationwide initiative. As for Max, his life became full of love and purpose. He spent his days surrounded by children who adored him and his evenings at home with Clara and Daisy, enjoying the warmth and safety he had once only dreamed of. The scars of his past remained, but they no longer defined him. 1 year after Max joined the therapy program, the community held a special event in his honor. Families whose lives he had touched gathered to celebrate his journey and the legacy he had created. Liam stood proudly on stage, holding Max's leash, and spoke to the crowd with confidence. "Max taught me that it is all right to be scared," he said, "and that you can always find hope, even when things seem impossible." The crowd erupted into applause, but Max remained calm. He wagged his tail and looked up at Liam as if to say, "We did it together."